All right, time for Let It Rip. Today we're talking money and politics. Let's let it rip. Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam in the CUNY TV studios in the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. Welcome to Let It Rip. Money and politics. The presidential race is both heating up and thinning out, and unlike years past, this race has at times shaped up to be a race of billionaires, or people who are able to raise billions of dollars. Early on, this had some wondering if Americans would have no choice but to vote for one billionaire or another on Election Day. Certainly anyone making a serious run would have to have a whole lot of money in their war chest, whether they were self-funded or raised the money, which brings special interest groups into the equation. How would that play out for the country? What are the pluses and drawbacks for voters? And how does all this money in politics affect African Americans and people of color? Here to help us look at the issue, we have activist and organizer Keron Alleyne, who's also the community coordinator for Brooklyn Community Board 5, and Newsday columnist and editorial board member Mark Chiusano. Welcome. It certainly can be said that money is big in politics right now. Has it become a billionaire sport? And Mark, how do we fix it?
Well, I think the first thing to think about is how much money we're talking about here. You know, Bloomberg has spent, as of the last filing deadline, $500 million on this campaign, $500 million. And, you know, another way to think about it is that he's putting in about $10 million a week on Facebook ads alone. So that buys you a lot. You know, with the ads, you can differentiate your ads, you can target them towards particular people and groups and states, even, you know, changing the way the video works a tiny, tiny bit and test it to see if that works better. So other candidates just don't have access to that, and it's definitely a difference between Bloomberg and the rest.
Keron, is it shutting out people of color?
Absolutely, Mike. When you look at the field right now, the field there's no people of color when you really think about the competition. When we look at Bloomberg and the spending that he's put forth, you know, this is a person who's worth $60 billion, and he's worth that $60 billion because of the system that we live under that allows for him to absorb all of that and take away from so many other people. So he puts his money where his interests are, and it allows him to buy notoriety and people. So he's buying elected officials.
But how do you know they don't just agree with his policies?
I know. I say this as somebody who grew up under Bloomberg's policies, right? I live in East New York, grew up in the 7-5. You know, I know we're going to get into it a little later, but stop and frisk was near and dear to my heart because of the experiences that I had under it. So the other individuals across the country that it has to be that they're bought up because that's Mike's strategy. You know, when he ran for mayor, he bought off cultural institutions in between election years. And it's proven, you know, through his philanthropic efforts. He put forth all of this money. And then he also puts money into their campaign coffers. It's there.
You mentioned stop and frisk. Now, that's come back to haunt him at this point. I want to play a quick clip here right now. This is Bloomberg apologizing for stop and frisk as he launched his campaign.
I now see that we could and should have acted sooner and acted faster to cut the stops. I wish we had. I'm sorry that we didn't. But I can't change history. However, today, I want you to know that I realized back then I was wrong, and I'm sorry.
Mark, what did you make of that?
Well, one thing I would note is that apology has gotten shorter and shorter in recent months. You know, that was the kind of longer version, and he went on even longer than that. These days, he says much, much less. He basically just says it was a mistake in the past, and it no longer affects the present, which I don't think is true. There's been various studies that have come out about the continuing effect of stop and frisk even in the past. And of course, stop and frisk as a policy isn't exactly over. It's much less used as it was in the past, but it's not gone.
I remember covering Mayor Bloomberg and his police commissioner back at that time. And one of the things they would say, and it was a little bit arrogant, is that, hey, you know, what do you want me to do? Another gun buyback program? You know, is that going to get the guns off the street? And I thought that was a bit arrogant at that time. Is that apology enough, Keron?
Absolutely not. When you think about someone who's in my age group who experienced these policies, and when I say experience, I couldn't walk down the street without being stopped or mean mugged by police officers going past. And I have countless stories of being stopped with my friends coming from playing basketball, walking through the park, coming back from Wendy's on bicycles, being stopped, walking up and down their stairs, being stopped, patted down for these guns that were non-existent with us, but because we fit a general description of folks that should have been stopped, we were stopped constantly. And that's just my personal experience, but there's plenty others who live not only in the 7-5, but in the 7-7 that have those same.
Now, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren both took him to task on this topic on the debate stage. Let's listen to that.
The reason the stop and frisk changed is because Barack Obama sent moderators to see what was going on. When we sent them there to say this practice has to stop, the mayor thought it was a terrible idea. We send them there.
The language he used is about stop and frisk. It's about how it turned out. Now, this isn't about how it turned out. This is about what it was designed to do to begin with. It targeted communities of color. It targeted black and brown men from the beginning.
Okay, now let's hear how he talks about that.
95% of your murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
What do you think about the effect of all of this on the Bloomberg campaign? Mark?
Well, it's as you saw on the debate stage, this is something that they're hitting him on, and they're hitting him on it hard. And it kind of speaks to all the candidates' strengths. I mean, you heard there with Biden was able to work in an Obama reference, in his attack. Warren, this is a classic example of her being able to show that the system was a problem, beyond just an individual. It was a systemic problem.
Keron?
Yeah, Bloomberg had 10 years to, apologize through action. And he chose now because it's of benefit to him. And for this one, he can't control the narrative with this. He can't buy off media folk. He can't buy off elected officials to speak on his behalf, even though he is doing it. I feel like the damage is done with stop and frisk, and it continues to haunt him. And it's more than a smear. It's just a testament to like his policies and how they weren't as good as some folks are promoting, like the Advantage program, which spurred what I think is this housing crisis that we're in right now. Him cutting that really put a lot of people out in the street. And when I graduated from college and I came home, and it was almost like zombies everywhere. People were in the streets because of Bloomberg.
So do you think all of this stuff has come back to do irreparable damage to the campaign?
I think so. I mean, the real question is how much does the money help? And it's a lot of money. I spoke to some voters who are even confused by looking at an ad that Bloomberg is running that has Obama in it, speaking of him very, very positively, and it almost looks like an endorsement.
It does.
It's really hard to see to know what effect that's going to have on the electorate.
Mm-hmm. Keron, your thought?
I feel like his campaign, the fact that we're talking about it, shows the effect of just what his money has done. He's come in later than anyone else. He's outspent everyone. And the fact that his campaign is we're talking about it as though he's been the greatest candidate. We can really just get back to the dialogue that's really promoting him, is that it's Bloomberg versus Trump, billionaire versus billionaire. We need one to beat one, which is the craziest thing to me. And Bloomberg himself, his campaign and the issues that he's touted as mayor, as far as a blemish, it's the truth of the matter. It's the truth. The truth is he's not fit.
Wow, lots to chew on there. Now, not just for the current race here, but where it stands and where we're headed for the future. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion, but shift our focus to money and politics and what it means more locally, including campaign finance reform at the state level. This is Let It Rip. Hi, I'm Mike Gilliam, and the show is Let It Rip. We're coming to you from New York City with a viewpoint that goes beyond the headlines. We're talking politics, the economy, social unrest, the things that matter most to you. It's called Let It Rip. Come join us for the conversation. Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. We're taking a look at money in politics. It costs big bucks to run for office. According to Federal Election Commission records, Barack Obama spent more than $1 billion to Mitt Romney's $992.5 million in 2012. But those numbers jumped in 2016 when Hillary Clinton raised $1.4 billion to Donald Trump's $957 million. This year, it looks like the candidates will definitely be north of $1 billion each. Joining us now is adjunct professor at LaGuardia College and doctoral student at the CUNY Graduate Center, Tanzeem Ajmiri. She's also a community activist. Welcome. And activist and organizer Keron Alleyne, who is also the community coordinator for Brooklyn Community Board 5, is still with us. If it takes being a billionaire or raising $1 billion to be in the game, have we forever changed who's going to be able to run for president?
That is a good question. You know, I think really we have to talk about it in terms of parties. And both parties have, for a very long time, been in the pockets of billionaires. So in some sense, I think, is it changing it? No, I think that these are the same people that were always going to get into politics and get into the Democratic or the Republican Party and really be in power and control things because they are corporate-run parties. The difference now, I think, is that the veil is kind of being lifted and people are really seeing, with Bloomberg, right, he bought his way into this election at the last minute. And so I think people are beginning to sort of realize, or masses of people at least, are beginning to realize, okay, something is wrong here. This is just about money. So I think it's more of the veil being lifted, if that makes sense.
What do you think, Keron?
You know, we're talking about a man who's worth $60 billion, and those billions of dollars he will spend, and he will spend, and he will spend. He will buy people. He will buy notoriety. He will buy your culture. He will put money into institutions, nonprofit organizations, to make sure that he has that groundswell of support in between the elected officials that put that infrastructure there. So I don't think that, you know, the veil is being lifted or anything like that. The system is just working the way that it's supposed to work. The money has always fueled politics. It has always fueled politics at the national level. You know, if you don't have money, you don't get notoriety.
Do you think, though, it's becoming more difficult for a person, say, from Brownsville, Brooklyn, to ever make it to the point where he could run for president of the United States?
I mean, was that ever really a possibility? Let's be real. In America, somebody from Brownsville or from the South Bronx or from whatever hood you're from, we're never going to be president. And because, like you said, Keron, the system was created to be this way, to operate this way, you know? And so I think that this myth, we really got to do away with that. Everybody was
some
never
would say
meant.
Barack Obama, though.
But he's not from Brownsville. He grew up very middle class.
He's from the south side of Chicago.
He's not from the south side of Chicago. He didn't grow up there. He lived there. His wife is definitely from there. But he did not grow up. He's was solidly middle class. He grew up in Hawaii. His grandparents had money. His mother has a PhD. I mean, he didn't come from humble beginnings.
Right.
If I could just add to that as well, you know, and I know we're talking serious stuff, but I feel like there's a little comedy here.
Yeah.
When we talk about Barack Obama, you're talking about the 1 in a billion black man.
Yes.
You don't have too many black men who grew up in Hawaii and Kansas.
Right.
You know, you
good
don't
point.
have that. So when you talk about the many opportunities for black men who've grown up in Brownsville, East New York, South Bronx, all of these neighborhoods, being president, as much as it looks good on paper, the hope, you know, the change we want to see, et cetera, all of the things that we're fueled to, you know, go to college and get in this debt because we can do it too. Right. It's a dream that we don't necessarily have. You know, it's not something that is really achievable.
So it never was really there to begin with.
No, definitely not.
Okay, back to Bloomberg and the money. You know, are you ever going to be able to escape that? And is it wrong for him to self-fund?
So the money is all encompassing. We are not going to be able to escape it. Here we are talking about it on this show. As late as he came in, as 4 primaries as he missed, here he is being the topic of conversation because his money has pushed himself, inserted himself to the top of the dialogue.
Okay, now some people support him and they say that it's okay. I want to hear from Carol Robles-Roman, who was his legal counsel for 12 years in the administration.
I don't know how one can buy a presidency, honestly. I don't think that's fair. I think that Michael Bloomberg is a candidate for office, and he's has a strategy that's different than the other candidates. I understand the issue that people want to look at very closely about money in politics. And there are no corporate interests that are infusing the Michael Bloomberg campaign. It's his own money. It's as transparent can be.
Tanzeem, what do you think about that?
I think we have to be realistic. Again, it's not just about Bloomberg. Obviously, he is a problem, and his money is a problem, but money in politics it's always been there. It's part of the Democratic and the Republican Party. Who are their funders? Who are they beholden to? It's the corporations. It's the people on Wall Street. So these, the big money has always been in politics, and it will always be there. And in a sense, I really believe that the presidency is always bought every time, by corporate interests. And so if we want to talk about money in politics, yeah, we can focus on Bloomberg, but really there's a bigger picture here, and it's that corporate money is fueling all of this, and really both parties are here to defend that class of people.
During one of the debates, Bernie Sanders went after Pete Buttigieg about that. Let's listen to that.
Maybe it's a time for the working class of this country to have a little bit of power in Washington rather than your billionaire campaign contributors.
What do you think?
I love Uncle Bernie. I think he's right about this, and let me preface that by saying, now I don't think Bernie is, gonna be the savior, and all of a sudden he's gonna come to, if he wins this election, he's not gonna come to office and change everything, because at the end of the day, he's still a politician. We're still working within a system that was created to be unfair, right? To favor the wealthy, the ruling class, rich white men, and so we have to keep that in mind. But what I really appreciate about what we're seeing with Sanders is that he's funded by the average person. His average contribution is $16. Most people that give to him are like teachers. I give to him because, I'm seeing something different, and I think this is what resonates with a lot of people. His economic policies, we're all being crunched to the point where we can't survive anymore. I believe it was a UN study where they sent people into every region of the United States, and they came away realizing that 80% of us across the country cannot afford housing and food.
Right.
I mean, it's just getting to a point where it's not sustainable. We can't reproduce ourselves. Rent is out of control. There's nowhere in this country where a $15 minimum wage is going to allow you to even rent an apartment. So we can't live, you know what I mean? So I feel like this is what is fueling a lot of people, whether it's the Latino community, the Black community, even the white community. It's the working class, like Bernie always says. We are the working class, and we are getting crunched. And at the end of the day, in America, we don't talk about class enough.
Keron, do you agree with her thoughts on Bernie?
So there's a couple of things to unpack with Bernie. By the most idealistic sense, Bernie's campaign, at least the way it's presented on paper, is what you would want from a political campaign. And I say that, allow me to explain. What you would want the masses of people to support a particular candidate. This is, of course, excluded from the billionaire donators that have traditionally pulled the strings of the party. You would want that. You want that as a candidate. You want a candidate that speaks directly to all of those contributors. The issues that you deal with. She beautifully outlined some.
Do you support his policies, though?
I can't say that I support all of his policies. So Bernie, and this is going there. Bernie on his policies on reparations really turned my spirit. He doesn't.
Well, what is it about Bernie that you don't like?
Well, if I'm being picky,
just tell me.
Bernie is he's a corporate Democrat. As much as he's for, he presents himself as for us and by us. Bernie doesn't sit in that seat that he's in if he doesn't cut a few deals. And some of his votes in the past, and I have to look back and make sure that I have them correctly. But some of his votes in the past don't speak to the Bernie that we all, not we all, but some of the young masses are supporting. It's not that Bernie.
So you're saying that what we're seeing is not really the real Bernie? Is that what you mean? I'm a little confused.
Well, politicians wear many different faces, Mike.
Right.
You know, so Bernie's giving us the face that's needed right now for him to win. He gave us a certain face in 2016, and it worked. You know, so he's now wearing that face mask to a different level and made sure to polish it up in the areas where there were chinks in his armor. So he's just wearing a face.
Do you agree with that?
I think you are right to say that all politicians wear a face. That is absolutely true. You know, and I agree. I think there are many critiques of Sanders that are fair, and I'm with you on them. Especially, you know, I didn't know what he said about reparations. Actually, I found that out recently, and so that's one place where I really disagree with him. But I think it is significant that we have a candidate for the first time who's talking about the working class in those terms, who's talking about, you know, the economic issues that are racial issues as well. We cannot say that they're not, you know, and I'm not saying you're saying that, but I do hear a lot of people say, well, he doesn't talk about race. But the thing is, if you look at economics in this country, it is overwhelmingly black and brown people who are the poor, and it's overwhelmingly women who are the poor. So we have to take that into consideration when we talk about, you know, he doesn't talk about gender, he doesn't talk about race, because these issues, you know, they intersect, they overline. But critiques of Sanders, yes, he is a politician, which is why I said what I said, which is that he's not going to be, you know, the savior to come in. Right. But if we can push him, like student loan forgiveness, this is serious. Our generation is crippled by this because we wanted to get an education, because we were told, hey, if you do this, you'll make it. This is what you're supposed to do. And we all, well, some of us went and did it. And now we can't even afford, like you said, to have kids, to buy a house. I mean, we are really struggling here. So there's that. But I think also the fact that, like, the Medicare for all stuff he's talking about, it's so important. We have to push him on these things. And I'm sitting here and listening to my words, and I can't believe that I'm putting so much faith into electoral politics, because I never thought.
I know. When I listen to Bernie, he says, like, hey, you need a little student loan forgiveness? Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
How's your health care? I got you. You know, I don't know where all that money's going to come from, and I think that's some of the argument that's being made out on the trail. Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on campaign finance one more time here.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it need to happen at the local level? I know in New York State they're trying to do it. They're trying to make this all revolve around smaller donations and public funding to try to get some of the special interests out. Support it?
Yeah. I think that's one place to start. I don't think that's the answer,
right,
but it's one place to start.
Keron?
Yeah, absolutely. There should be insurgent candidates who don't come in with money and a battery of lawyers definitely are going to need help from the state and the city to really fund their campaigns to have a fighting chance. And when we look at the local elections, we don't have billionaires essentially running, but they are and can be behind the scenes putting money into campaign coffers. When you look at the local elections, the immediate environment is affected. So you talk about like developers who are millionaires and getting in that billion dollar area. They will put money into campaign coffers, and that's where you have these incumbents who've been here for years and years and years who sit on that sort of funding. You need for candidates who are not necessarily a part of the establishment, they need that financial support.
Let's hear from someone who was part of the establishment. This is Mike Bloomberg talking about contributing.
Record. They talked about 40 Democrats. 21 of those were people that I spent $100 million to help elect. All of the new Democrats that came in and put Nancy Pelosi in charge and gave the Congress the ability to control this president, I got them.
I bought them. You heard that?
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah. All right. Okay. Lots to think about. It almost seems like if we're ever going to see a candidate rise up from the ranks and battle for the presidency, that person is going to first have to be a huge success, like a millionaire, maybe even a billionaire to even have a shot. Even with inflation, it makes you wonder if that is what the founders had in mind. I want to thank our guests, Newsday's columnist and editorial board member, Mark Chiusano, adjunct professor at LaGuardia College and doctoral student at the CUNY Graduate Center, Tanzeem Ajmiri, who's also a community activist, and organizer Keron Alleyne, who's also the community coordinator for Brooklyn Community Board 5. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with some final thoughts. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. We've been talking money and politics. The cost of winning the presidency has skyrocketed. Between 2000 and 2012, it more than quadrupled. The last race, where Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump but lost the Electoral College, may have been an anomaly. The current feeling is more is better. More money allows the candidate's face to be seen by more voters, and that translates into votes on Election Day. To that end, President Trump has vowed to raise $1 billion for his reelection. His challenger will need the same or more, given the exposure offered by the incumbency. If you aren't a billionaire with deep pockets, it's tough to get that kind of money. So voters are forced to decide whether they find self-financing by the rich acceptable. If not, they must realize the money is going to come from someplace, whether it be small donors or large, or special interest groups and political action committees. Now, the candidates are going to need huge war chests of cash if they're going to make a run for office. It's just the nature of the game in 2020, and it may be the nature of the game for the foreseeable future. I hope not, but it may be some time before you see an average American from humble beginnings end up in the White House. I'm Mike Gilliam. We'll see you next time on Let It Rip.